Hi YouTube, thank you so much for watching Mommy Did You Know? So this is actually our 4-part breastfeeding and pumping course. If you can just hit that subscribe button, that would be great. You can at least follow my journey, watch our other videos. I have so many resources available for you. For today's lesson, we're actually going to talk about breastfeeding barriers. So I know that it will really be helpful for you and your family. So without further ado, let's begin.
Mommy, did you know?
So for the first breastfeeding barrier that we're going to talk about, it's going to be how to correct a painful latch. I know that a lot of times moms, they'll come in, they'll start breastfeeding, you might have a little bit of soreness, but if the soreness continues throughout your breastfeeding session, or if you're getting cracks and blisters and bleeding, that can mean that we might need to tweak up your positioning a little bit. So I'm going to give you a very easy checklist that will help you to be able to have a more comfortable breastfeeding experience. So number one is to check your positioning. I know sometimes you'll have your baby all wrapped up in the blanket and you'll try to put the baby to the breast and the baby doesn't have a very good position, because you want to make sure that the position is tummy to tummy and also that the baby's skin to skin. That helps to get a nice wide open mouth and a nice deep latch, because that's really key, is to have a wide open mouth and a deep latch. So your positioning is very important. It helps the baby to be more comfortable, it helps mommy to be more comfortable, especially because sometimes your feeding sessions can last quite a bit. So an improper position can cause the baby to get anxious, they'll have a hard time latching on. So for the first step, it's always look at your baby's early feeding cues. I know sometimes people, they kind of wait until the baby starts crying and getting aggravated, but look at those early stages of hunger. Don't wait until the later stages. Earlier stages include REM eye movement. You'll start seeing their eyes move underneath their eyelids. You'll see the hand to mouth movements. You'll see sucking, lip smacking. Rooting is when they start moving their head back and forth, and sometimes they'll even start opening and closing their mouths. They're so cute like that. Late signs is when they start, moving frantically and crying. If you wait until that part of your baby's hunger process, that's usually a lot later, and then you have to calm them down before putting them to the breast, which of course it takes a little bit more time, effort, and it causes a lot of stress on us moms, So wait until those early feeding cues, not the late ones. You want to make sure that your position is tummy to tummy. Check the baby's diaper too. Sometimes if your diaper's full, it'll be kind of difficult to latch on. And of course, skin to skin. So that's number one. Just check our positioning, put the baby skin to skin, check the diaper. And that latch process, just make sure that the latch is nice open wide, you have a nice deep latch, and make sure that you lose that latch halfway through the session too. I know sometimes you're breastfeeding, you get so calm, and then all of a sudden you start falling asleep, and then that baby loses the latch. And then I come in, and then the mom's kind of sleeping a little bit, and the baby's just going like little kisses. That will really cause a sore nipple for you, and I don't want that to happen to you. And another tip that you can do, is just one of my tricks. You can actually compress the breast as the baby's eating, and that'll help with the milk flow. It'll help to kind of lessen the duration of the feed as well. And then to relieve pain and sore nipples, of course, breastfeeding is not easy in the beginning. So if you're having some soreness, what you can do is use nursing pads. Those are really helpful, just because what happens is make sure that you have soft nursing pads, because some nursing pads, if you put them on, the friction kind of hurts you a lot. You can also use the gel pads. Gel pads were like the only way that I was able to breastfeed in the beginning, just because the gel pads allows you to actually be able to put on clothes. What you can also do is you can actually express some of your colostrum, put it over the nipple and the areola, let it air dry for about 10-15 minutes. Not a lot of people realize that, but it's actually a really good tip, and I'm sure your significant other, baby's daddy, does not mind if you are out with everything. For just like 10-15 minutes usually is good. It has like a nice protective barrier, and your colostrum has healing properties, so it's really amazing how that happens. Of course, you can always use nipple creams as you need, but of course your colostrum is better. It doesn't have really all those products, but nipple creams work really well. I have some nipple creams and a bunch of engorgement and nipple pain supplies in my on my website, mommydidyouknow.com. You can see a whole bunch of different things. And then of course you can also pump. So like, let's say you have a really painful nipple on this side that started getting cracks and bleeding. What you can do is you can actually pump that side, put your baby to the other side until that side heals. And sometimes that says that helps a little bit. And then of course you can also schedule a visit with a lactation specialist. I just so happen to be a lactation counselor, and I do offer online as well as in-home consultations. So check out my website and you'll be able to definitely help you out with that. So for the second breastfeeding barrier that I want to talk about is actually kind of something controversial and something that not a lot of people want to talk about, but that's actually flat and inverted nipples. So I'm just gonna be honest with you, Mom. Not everybody looks like the book. Not everybody looks like the textbook, and that is perfectly fine. Sometimes you won't have that beautiful breastfeeding nipple that they show you in the videos. Sometimes your nipples might be a little flat, or sometimes they might even be inverted. Or sometimes you might have had a breast augmentation or other types of breast surgeries, and your nipple might not exactly look like the textbook. That is okay. You can still breastfeed. By the way, fun fact, breast augmentation does not necessarily mean that you will not be able to breastfeed. Breast augmentation sometimes means that your storage capacity might be a little bit decreased, but your production will still pretty much be the same. As for reduction, sometimes it comes in the way of your milk production because you're taking away the breast tissue. So even though you had breast surgery, Mommy, it does not mean that you're not able to breastfeed. I just want to point that out there because a lot of people assume that if they had breast surgery, they cannot breastfeed. So it's really important to know that the option is there, but you want to make sure, be observant of your baby, make sure that they're eating enough, staying hydrated, they have all those pees, poops, and they're up to date with their weight. So let's say you have flat or inverted nipples. You can still breastfeed. And I'm gonna say another thing that's very controversial, but me personally, I do not like nipple shields. One, I think it kind of takes away from the baby and mommy being able to bond, being connected. And two is actually it's really difficult to wean the baby off of the nipple shields. Very few people actually need a nipple shield. Sometimes if they're inverted, but most babies can still form, they call it a teat with flat nipples. So most babies can still suction out a flat nipple. So what you can do, number one, if you have a flat or inverted nipple, it is very important that you stay up to date with your lactation counselor. You get seen in the hospital, make sure that your baby's being seen by the pediatrician as well. And then put the baby skin to skin with you, and what you can do is actually manually express a little bit and stimulate that nipple to help retract it. Most flat nipples actually come out if you use your finger or you stimulate a little bit. Most flat nipples actually come out, and that's such a miraculous thing. So number two, manually with your hand. If you're doing that, number two is actually can use a manual pump. So hand pumps, I personally like the Medela pump, and you can use whatever hand pump that you want, and you can actually use it for a few seconds to a minute just to kind of stimulate and invert the nipple a little bit. Then you can latch on the baby, and usually that works. If you have inverted nipples, usually still your baby might be able to retract it. So you just kind of play it by ear, see what works for your baby. Another thing to note, engorgement causes flat nipples sometimes, believe it or not. But if you are really engorged, sometimes that breast is so hard that your nipple actually sometimes goes in. So if your nipple is flat or inverted because of engorgement, you have to fix the source of the problem, right? So what you have to do is you have to fix the engorgement part. So engorgement, you can use the cabbage leaves, you can help stimulate a little bit to soften the breast just enough to retract the nipple. You can do all these different types of things. So that is my breastfeeding barrier class for flat and inverted nipples. Now for this section of our breastfeeding barriers class, we're actually going to talk about anatomical changes of the mouth. Mainly I'm going to talk about cleft-lip-and-palate along with tight lingual frenulums. And we're going to talk about what that might cause for your baby, different signs of that, and how you can correct it and when you actually do need to correct it. So for the first one I'm going to talk about is actually a tight lingual frenulum. Have you ever heard when they go, oh, your baby has a tongue tie or a lip tie? Basically what it means is that there's this little kind of string of skin that's underneath your tongue. So I actually have a little one, so I'm going to show you here. It's very, very, very small, but it's like this little string of skin that's underneath the tongue. At least for me, it's not really restricting, so that's why I never really had to do anything to it. However, some babies, they actually have such a really tight tongue tie that they cannot retract their tongue out of their mouth. What you'll notice with those is when your baby is breastfeeding or bottle feeding, they won't really put the tongue out, or even when they're crying or something, you'll notice that their tongue does not really retract out. Now that is important for breastfeeding, because in order to breastfeed, you need that tongue to come out and help compress that breast and retract to be able to get that milk transfer. If their tongue's not able to come out, what happens is they're not able to transfer that milk. So if it gets in the way of breastfeeding, they might do a little tongue tie clipping, which I've actually seen. I mean, it sounds scarier than it is, but all they really do is they just clip it really fast. Sometimes the pediatrician does it, or sometimes they'll have someone that comes in and does the surgery. I've actually seen it done in the bedside before, but basically what it is because if the baby cannot retract that tongue out, they cannot really extract the breast milk. So one of the classic signs of a tongue tie is when you'll hear clicking when the baby is breastfeeding. So that basically means the baby's breastfeeding and you'll hear basically the baby's on the breast eating, but then the tongue's not able to come out, so then they start clicking with their tongues. So they'll just go. If you hear that, assess the position, check the latch, see if the baby has a wide latch. Sometimes it's just the baby might not be latched completely and the lips are not flanged out like that. But if you hear the clicking, that's definitely a big sign. Or sometimes you'll see the cheeks kind of compressing in like this as well. So if you see that, just you can see it too, and you can let your nurse know, you can let your pediatrician know, because that is one big issue that a lot of breastfeeding babies have that, well, I mean, it's not that common, but if they do have it, a lot of the times they do have issues breastfeeding. Now, the second breastfeeding barrier that I want to talk about is actually something that people don't talk about that much, but it's cleft lip and palate. Did you know you can actually still breastfeed with a baby that has cleft lip and palate? That's because actually the breast sometimes does have the ability to cover those openings when the baby has an opening there. So you can kind of just play by ear, see how your baby is. Most of the time they're still able to breastfeed, but of course your pediatrician will still follow up on you, and it's also maternal choice as well. Some moms, they don't really want to breastfeed when the baby has a cleft lip and palate, which is fine. A big, really interesting thing is they actually have special needs bottles that are specially made for babies with cleft lip and palate. I actually have it in my store in mommydidyouknow.com. If you click shop, and in there you'll see it under baby supplies, and you'll also see it under pumping and breastfeeding supplies. Just because I think it's really important also to discuss these special needs, because it's something that not a lot of people know about. Most moms that have babies that have cleft lip and palate didn't even realize that their baby can breastfeed. So some of these things are actually really interesting to know, and I hope that this really helped you out. Thank you so much for watching this breastfeeding and pumping course. I really hope that it was a blessing for you and your family. Make sure you can also check on mommydidyouknow.com. You can actually sign up for the official online course. I have the ebook on there. It has so many wonderful resources for you guys. And please make sure that you subscribe. Press that subscribe button down there. It really will help to grow the channel and get these resources, amazing videos out to everybody who needs them.